Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Comic Book Cove. I'm Tom Morris.
And I'm Josh Holderbaum.
Josh, episode 34, two sides to every story, or at least to these stories. These comic books, we're talking about them, and we're like, hey, every story has a different point of view. Every story with one character, two characters, they're looking at the same information, the memories going forward, and they recall it a certain way.
Yep, or even that kind of the overlaying of what's happening now, what's happening in the past, and how that interconnects with what's happening in the comics right now.
Yes. Well, there's some good issues this week, and we even are going to talk about a Harley Quinn issue. Can you believe that?
I know, yeah, really. Been a long time, long time since we read them behind the scenes, but we don't normally review them because we can't make sense of a lot of them, but we're getting there.
I felt like this one, when we get to it, it kind of dialed back the absurdity. And there are some times when absurdity is great, like again, two sides to every story. What might be absurd to some might be normal for the other. And as we talk about these issues this week, we'll go about the different sides. In this episode of Comic Book Cove, we are going to discuss the following titles. Green Arrow number 20, Green Lanterns number 20, Harley Quinn number 17, Superman number 20, Nightwing number 18, and Batman number 20. And as always, spoilers ahead. Green Arrow number 20, Vertigo, The Return of Roy Harper conclusion. We haven't talked about Green Arrow for a few issues. So this one I thought was important to talk about, The Return of Roy Harper. Who is Roy Harper to Green Arrow, and why is he such an important character, not only to the Green Arrow mythology, but also to the Titans mythology?
We know Roy Harper right now as Arsenal, who's Green Arrow's former sidekick. He was Speedy before that. Pre-Flashpoint, he also called himself Red Arrow for a while, which is what Amy's calling herself right now. In this, Arsenal takes a break from the Titans and he goes to the Indian reservation outside Seattle, where he was raised. He was raised by Indians after his biological family was killed in a forest fire. He goes out there. There just so happens to be an oil pipeline called the Black Artery that's going to be built right through that reservation. And of course he has, kind of the dual responsibility of going there to see his family and also going there to, kind of try and fight the oil pipeline, which just happens to be funded by Queen Industries and Cyrus Broderick.
Roy Harper has been away from Oliver Queen for a while. He doesn't know what changes Oliver Queen has gone through in the past year, which makes it very interesting when Roy Harper sees him. Green Arrow is, hey, how are you doing? Punch, knock down. This is all your fault. And that's when you see the Queen Industries on the pipeline. Wow, what a way to get reacquainted with someone.
Yeah. Well, and the flashbacks we see in this story arc show that there's a lot of kind of bad blood between Arsenal. I mean, more on Arsenal's side than with Green Arrow to him. Green Arrow would like to bring him back into the fold, but Arsenal really doesn't want to have anything to do with him for a lot of the story arc. He wants to deal with this his own way. And we also see in the flashbacks that Green Arrow finds him. He's kind of has some of the substance abuse problems going all the way back to, even pre-teen years. Takes him in, makes him his assistant after he picks his pocket at the mall. Because Roy Harper's been living in a shopping mall for that long. He takes him in, makes him Speedy, and immediately starts building all these trick arrows and stuff. And Green Arrow can't even remember which one any of them does. He keeps saying, okay, what does this one do? What does this one do? and Roy keeps saying, well, I sorted your quiver. They all have different fletching. You'll be able to find him, no problem. And he keeps, kind of losing him with all these trick arrows, saying that it's just too much. And then, of course, we have Count Vertigo, who shows up as kind of like their first villain in the comics.
What's the difference between this version of Count Vertigo as opposed to pre-Flashpoint, even New 52?
Pre-Flashpoint Vertigo was, he was a blonde-haired European guy. He came from a wealthy family. He was born with an inner ear defect So he had a little, basically like an ear implant.
Okay.
And somehow that gave him the power to manipulate other people's minds and stuff. New 52 Vertigo, who I only saw him when they did the Forever Evil event, and he was on one of the Green Arrow covers, and I just remembered looking at him and thinking, that's not Count Vertigo. Like, I mean, he really, really different, all these big swirly patterns on him. I think he was white and red. It was one of the things that really annoyed me, because Vertigo was always black and green. I mean, it was kind of like with you and Nightwing, making him red. It just, it didn't work. This one kind of combines. He's got the blonde hair, he's got the black and green. He's looks way more powerful now. I mean, he flies around, he hovers, and basically in this he ends up kind of being a drug for I was about to call him Jason Todd, for Roy Harper at this point. And he that's after he's been hooked on heroin.
Yes.
Like we had at the end of the Hard Traveling Heroes story arc, where he originally got hooked. So Count Vertigo kind of turns himself into the drug for Roy Harper to take.
Roy Harper, especially in this story arc, his dual identity you were talking about. Green Arrow wants to accept him, but his adopted family, his brother Bird, his brother Bird, doesn't want him there.
Yeah, because it's implied during this whole story arc that Roy ended up killing his adoptive father. You know, we just see kind of flashbacks of him with a knife or an arrow sticking out of his neck, and it's clearly one of his arrows. And so it's not really mentioned in that, exactly how that happened. Roy himself says, I was drunk, I don't know how it happened, it could have been me, I don't know.
Right.
And it's not until the very end of this where, they end up finding that the local sheriff who is overseeing, the protests and stuff is actually corrupt.
Yes.
He's on the payroll of Cyrus Broderick. He's brought in the Wild Dogs, which is, kind of a vigilante team modeled after the established hero Wild Dog, who's in the Cave Carson Has a Cybernetic Eye comics.
Yes.
Which I read one of those, and so it's like, hey, he's in that, cool. And this is like kind of an evil group based on him that sort of takes his mindset kind of to the extremes.
Yes.
So, of course, Roy has to team up with Green Arrow, Black Canary shows up. It's only after all that that Roy realizes this sheriff is actually the one who killed his dad, or his adoptive dad, Big Bo. I was going to say Big Bird. I was going to say Big Bear. I'm losing it with these B names. But he realizes that it was after he robbed a liquor store one night, this sheriff was going to come arrest him, because that was off the reservation. The tribal police normally let it slide. This sheriff wasn't going to let it happen. In the fight with Big Bo, again, I was going to say Big Bear, he ends up stabbing him in the neck, and Roy Harper ends up thinking that he did it because he was still drunk at the time.
Yes.
So he ends up putting that chip on his shoulder just off. I mean, he doesn't have that weighing on him anymore.
At the very end of this issue, we see that they have enough evidence, because once Ollie found out that Cyrus Broderick and Queen Industries is behind all this, they're looking for any type of transaction, any type of electronic trail that they could pin Cyrus to this mob that is disrupting the peaceful protest. And originally Green Arrow was there to help them protest and make sure it didn't get violent. And him and Black Canary ended up having to fight on the side of the protesters to make sure that no one got hurt. But now that at the end they said, we have the evidence, we found out that the sheriff is corrupt, that he admitted that we're doing this so we can get money, so we can, our village, if you want to call it, can survive and thrive and get these jobs. So now they have the evidence to take their protest to the next level, making sure that they implicate Queen Industries. And we see that Roy Harper and Green Arrow have an understanding. Now it's Roy Harper saying, what can I do to help you? Because he didn't know that Ollie is broke, he has no company, he has no home, he is dirt poor. And now they're going back to Seattle, which is going to do something with Star City, the Star City where everything fit. And Black Canary, they're going to go back and I think maybe try to reclaim what he's lost.
Yeah.
So his family is now stronger than ever, even though he might be financially poor. He now has his family back, at least in his partner, and he feels that Roy has come onto his own and they can go forward.
Yep, and with Roy on his side, that's also one more ally for him, because John Diggle took off a couple issues ago with Merlin. Mm-hmm. He had to go save him because he owed him his life or something. So he just kind of disappeared and went AWOL on that. So at least Green Arrow has another guy on his side, and we get to see Arsenal in more comics, which I enjoyed. I really enjoyed kind of their back and forth in this issue. Arsenal says, "Hey, I'm glad you got rid of the goggles and makes you look less like a tree frog, and like that you got the goatee going back. Makes you look a little less like a baby."
Exactly. We will see more Green Arrow. We'll see what happens with his family in the issues ahead. Green Lanterns number 20. Polarity, Chapter 2, Drowning. What's Dr. Polaris been up to recently?
Well, we saw Dr. Polaris right towards the end of the Suicide Squad Justice League crossover. He has mask off. He was thinking, "Oh, geez, I've hurt people again. I've done all these terrible things." Because Dr. Polaris does have a couple personalities floating through his head. He's got his normal one of Dr. Neil Emerson, and he's got the Dr. Polaris persona who wants to go out and kill everybody and be a crazy person. And in this, Dr. Polaris decides he's going to go out and find his brother Seth, who's dying from terminal brain cancer. It's the same kind of cancer that Neil Emerson originally got into medicine to try and cure. He's tried to use basically magnetic therapy to cure cancer patients. That ended up giving him powers. It also ended up somehow getting him discredited from the medical community. There's some sort of committee that he claims kind of intentionally went after him. It's not really clear how that happened, but he wants to go out and find Seth and save him. Seth's currently in a hospital. He's in a coma. He's basically going to die at any second. Mm-hmm. Polaris says, that's not good enough. I'm a better doctor. I have more abilities than all of this. So he tries to take Seth. And at the same time, Simon and Jessica are asked by Suicide Squad director Harcourt, who's the replacement for Amanda Waller, to go out and go find Dr. Polaris. Because she thinks only a Green Lantern would be a good fit for him. So, and it's funny too, even when they go to confront him, and Emerson says, "Oh, great, Green Lanterns. Yep. Wonderful. And not even ones I know."
I think he feels like he's been dismissed his whole life, and he's not been taken serious enough, and that's where the Dr. Polaris, like you said, he does have the split personality disorder, and he wants to do good, but he said he was off his medication, and he was starting to feel that nagging of Dr. Polaris. Once he starts hearing voices, he knows he's going to have an episode. Then originally, like you said, the Suicide Squad, or the task force, tried to come after Dr. Polaris, but it didn't work. If anything, I think it helped spark his return to that persona, because if they would have brought his medicine, he knew he was slipping and he really needed his medicine, but they tried to capture him and he went Dr. Polaris on him. And then she showed the Green Lantern and said, "Hey, we tried to do it by the rules, now we need you to go in and take him and use lethal force as necessary." No, that's not going to happen. No. So we pick up this issue where previously Dr. Polaris had wrapped him down up in automobiles and had thrown him down to the bottom of the river or down of the lake, and they had problems with willpower trying to get out. At first, Simon couldn't muster up enough willpower. He was trying hard, and it became Jessica who was able to conquer her fear to summon up the willpower to get out. Yeah,
and it was kind of really shocking to see Simon, trying really hard, and Jessica seriously just standing there.
Yes.
Just patiently waiting for, anything to happen. Makes me almost wonder if Simon had some claustrophobia issues. Or he mentioned too, he was surrounded by some of the cars, and he was talking about some of the cars. It's like, if you make me hate this car, I'm never gonna forgive you, Dr. Polaris.
We also see a little bit more backstory of Simon with his relationship with his brother-in-law. Yeah. And how he said that originally he was able to cure his brother-in-law from his coma with the Green Lantern ring, which they thought was not going to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
And now his brother-in-law and him are fighting because they say, you're not contributing to the house. You basically are looked upon as a rock star. And he doesn't feel that way. But how can you be a superhero full-time and have a job?
Yeah.
Don't they should have a payroll.
How can any of them even, I mean, not just a job, a life.
Yeah.
I mean, any sort of personal life. And two, we see as Simon's dealing with Dr. Polaris, he starts to think more and more about Nazir, because Polaris is doing all this for his brother, and Simon thinks about all the things he's done for his brother-in-law too. So it almost makes you wonder, okay, is Simon's not that nice of a guy. He's not really the diplomatic type, but I mean, could Simon possibly reach out to Polaris at some point and say, hey, I know what it's like to deal with that sort of personal pain. You know, we can bring you back over to that side. We'll see.
Two different stories in this issue, kind of ending the issue. When Dr. Polaris and the Green Lanterns are getting ready to fight, Seth goes into flatline. Because we have to say that Dr. Polaris took his brother Seth out of the hospital. It was first Neil, it was his personality, then at Dr. Polaris. He took all the equipment and went and was trying to treat him himself.
Yeah, he was going to like pass metal through the tumor to, you know, to get it out that way, you know, using his powers. And then it's his own little kind of mental delusion, sort of, where he's, you know, he's there, Dr. Polaris is there, Seth is there, and it very much seems like Seth and Dr. Polaris are kind of his conscience.
Yes.
I mean, Dr. Polaris is urging him to do, you know, really bad things. I mean, lash out. You've been, you know, you've been ignored. You've been screwed over that many times. Go lash out. And Seth is over here saying, no, hey, I'm still here on the table. You still have a responsibility to me. You're going to save me. You know, I have a family. We're going to take that trip to Spain. Come on, we need to do this. And it almost sounds like Polaris doesn't want to see Seth get saved.
No.
Because if Seth gets saved, that might be the end of Polaris. So, yeah, when Seth flatlines, kind of makes it seem like Polaris might get a little more stronger in this fight, assuming he does flatline and, you know, die.
What about the other storyline that seems to be a subplot that is going to build towards something? We saw Guy Gardner, we saw John Stewart, and we saw two other Green Lanterns having a round table above Earth talking about the rogue...
That was above Mogo.
Above Mogo, okay.
Yep.
Talking about that rogue Guardian that they saw.
Yeah, because a few issues ago when they were dealing with the Phantom Lantern, Simon and Jessica they sent out a distress signal to any other Green Lanterns. And of course, by the time they took down the Phantom Lantern, Ismat Kul and Vath Sarn showed up and said, hey, what's the problem? What's going on here? And got real, you know, kind of jerky with Simon and Jessica. And then they ended up seeing Ronnie, who's the rogue Guardian who's been living with them for so long, who's created the Phantom Lantern. It's kind of the weird, eccentric Guardian who doesn't really get along with anybody. And so in that issue, Isamat and Vath wanted to bring Ronnie back to Mogo, you know, kind of get the other Guardians together, get everybody on the same page. Ronnie said, no, I don't want to go there. I'm your boss. You can't order me around.
Right.
It's a typical, you know, super crotchety Ronnie at that point. And now that's Isamat and Vath finally telling Guy Gardner and John Stewart and Ganthet and Sade too, hey, this guy's on Earth. We don't know who he is. We couldn't bring him back. You know, should we go back and get him? What should we do? And it sounds like the consensus is go back, get Ronnie, and bring Simon and Jessica too, because Guy Gardner says, I want to give him another butt kicking.
Yes.
Meaning, you know, give him a bit more training. We also know that Ronnie right now is possessed by Volthoom, who's the first Lantern. And we know Volthoom wants revenge on the Green Lantern Corps. So it seems like even if they get Ronnie back to Mogo, that's not going to bode well for the Green Lanterns.
Definitely.
To have Captain Crazy coming back in the form of Ronnie.
Definitely that subplot is going to pay out in future issues of Green Lantern. What do you think we're going to see out of Simon and Jessica? I feel like Jessica is going to continue to grow as she conquers more of her fear. And Simon might have a little bit more self-doubt because of his kind of distress at home, balancing his home with his duties as a Green Lantern.
Yeah, I feel like Simon and Jessica kind of switched the soul-searching role for a while, because for a lot of the series we had Jessica trying to figure out, okay, why am I a Green Lantern? Why am I here? I have anxiety. I shouldn't be a Green Lantern. And Simon acting more as the Rock. And in this story arc, we're seeing Jessica take over as a little bit more reliable, and Simon saying, okay, I have some issues at home. I need to get on a new page at this point. So it's character growth for both of them. And Jessica's still maybe the most lovable Green Lantern I can think of. I mean,
Jaybird.
Yeah, but
Sherwin calls her Jaybird.
Yeah. Or even when a few issues ago when Isma Kal and Bafsarn came down and she's shaking their hands saying, wow, have you met Kilowog? Have you done all these things? Like, have you been to Moga? Have you been to Oa? It's just, she's lovable.
That's true. I do like her personality.
Yeah.
With that, we'll see what happens with Green Lanterns, where whatever happens with Dr. Polaris and the subplot of going back to Mogo for a butt-kicking training. With that, we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, it's time for Harley Quinn number 17 and Superman number 20. Drink your milk, and we'll be back in just a moment.